Hey there, everybody. Welcome to Weekend Waypoints, Friday edition, kicking off week 2 of SEC baseball. And this weekend promises to be a little more exciting than last weekend, right? I mean, last weekend's schedule was a little bit light, for being kind. Shout out to Tennessee for giving us some games between good teams last weekend. But this weekend promises to be, at least on paper, a lot more to really sink our teeth into. So we've got a lot to get to on this episode. First, though, let's take a look back. I've got just some news and notes from the previous week because, unlike the lead up to last week, we actually had some games in between, midweek games, obviously. We just more news rolling in here. First is frankly some negative news, and that's Alabama starting pitcher Riley Quick, down with TJ, lost for the year, and that's tough because by all accounts he had an excellent fall and lead up to the season, was looking like an obvious breakout candidate, and was looking like a huge part of that Alabama rotation. So, that rotation of Hess and Quick and Moza in some order is now broken up, and that was going to be a huge piece of Alabama's success in 2024. So, Greg Ferrone getting the start this week in the Louisville transfer, big lefty, capable in his own right, to be clear, but man, with the way Riley Quick was throwing the ball leading up to this season, there was just so much excitement to see what he could do. So that's just a bummer, and it's obviously a bummer anytime someone has to go down with TJ. So best of luck in him in his recovery from that. Let's move on to some midweek stuff. Liam Peterson, Florida freshman right-hander. We didn't get to see him last weekend because weather washed out most of Florida's series against St. John's. They only got the one game in, so they pushed back to where Liam Peterson was going to start on Tuesday, the road game against North Florida. So the game in Jacksonville. Let me pull up the box score here. 1 second. Just so you can kind of see there, so that you can see there that 3 innings pitched, 1 hit, no runs, 1 walk, 7 strikeouts. That's what you're looking for. That means 7 of his 9 outs came via the strikeout. Was just basically dominant. You could see clips that there are a lot of people I saw clipping, his outing, clipping individual pitches from his outing. So if you run a Twitter search for Liam Peterson, you'll find video from that start. I would highly recommend it. It's just impressive stuff all around. And it should, if you're a Florida fan, should give you a lot of optimism about Peterson being a real weekend dude for you sooner rather than later, and perhaps as much as soon as this season, frankly. So that was exciting stuff from a Florida perspective there. A couple of other midweek things, not so great. Then the Magnolia State schools continue to kind of struggle in this early season. There's really no other way to put that. Mississippi State swept against Austin Peay. 2 very different games. One, just a low-scoring affair where, again, the Bulldogs pitched well, but just couldn't get enough offense going to do anything. And so they lose that one. And then the second one, just a wild 13-10 game where at one point Mississippi State led 10-5. Austin Peay came storming back, tied at 10-10, then got 3 runs in I believe it was the 9th, to take a 13-10 lead and then eventually win it. And even that's a little bit deceiving because Mississippi State got 10 runs, but they only had 6 hits. So, it's not really like the offense came alive in any sort of real way. It was a lot of walks for Austin Peay, and State took advantage. I mean, they scored 10 runs, but just weren't able to do enough on the mound. And so it's just that they're stuck in kind of this frustrating cycle where, when they pitch well enough, they haven't done enough offensively. Their first 4 games of the season, they held every opponent to 4 runs or fewer. So the 3 games against Air Force and the first game against Austin Peay in the midweek, and they were 2-2 in those games. And you have to be better in those types of games, especially when you have some of the offensive pieces they have. And then, the Wednesday game was just kind of an ugly game that happens sometimes in the midweek, but it's just, you can't lose both to Austin Peay. You just can't. And I think everyone knows that. No one's making the counter argument there, even if Austin Peay is an improved club, and they might be. Aaron Fitt for our site wrote about them after the the wins against Mississippi State, and there's some intriguing pieces there. So I don't want to slight them, but if you're Mississippi State at home, those are games you're kind of expecting to win. So they have a series this weekend against Georgia Southern. Georgia Southern off to a slow start in their own right, but that is a consistently winning program that has talented players. They can pitch it pretty well. So if these offensive struggles continue for Mississippi State and they don't play well, Georgia Southern could get them there. I'll be kind of fascinated to see how that plays out. Chris Lemonis in his Wednesday after the game Wednesday against Austin Peay and his post game media availability, said he kind of chewed on the players a little bit after Wednesday because it was just kind of unacceptable. So we'll see how much of a response we get from the Bulldogs this weekend against Georgia Southern. Ole Miss lost to Arkansas State 4-2. Kind of a continuation of what we saw in Hawaii from Ole Miss, not being able to score runs. The team hitting 181 as they head into the weekend, and considering that you like a lot of the individual talents in their lineup, that's pretty shocking. And Arkansas State, a program, again, much like Austin Peay with Mississippi State, Arkansas State, a program that you expect Ole Miss to handle, and most of the time, because these two teams play in midweek quite a bit, most of the time they do handle them without incident. And that's just kind of the way that goes, but a different deal this time around. So Ole Miss also dropping a game there now unexpectedly. Both teams just really need to bounce back this weekend. I talked about the Georgia Southern series. Ole Miss has High Point. That's a series that even a scuffling version of Ole Miss, you would expect them to handle. But again, you would have said the same thing about some of these games so far, and that hasn't been the case. So we will keep an eye out to see how that goes as well. A couple teams got the weekend started a little bit early this week. Missouri got a win over Cal State Bakersfield, hit 4 home runs in that game, did Missouri. So getting their weekend at the Tony Gwynn Legacy Tournament off to a quick start. They're playing that tournament Thursday to Saturday, or at least Mizzou is, Thursday to Saturday. So they'll finish up early as well, and not just starting early. And then LSU got a win over Northern Illinois. The big news, if you will, out of that one was Gage Jump getting the start. And you had to like what you see there as I pull up the box score here. 2 1/3 innings, 2 hits, 1 unearned run with 1 walk and 4 strikeouts. And full disclosure, I was traveling I'm here in Jacksonville for the Jacks Classic tournament that involves Auburn. So I didn't get to see any of this start with my own eyes, but the numbers are what they are. They're pretty solid. And I got asked last night on New Orleans radio I was doing what my expectations were for Gage Jump. And I just kind of answered, a little bit of a cop-out, but I just kind of answered, whatever the expectations are, we're going to have to be patient for him to reach whatever end goal that is, because the guy hasn't pitched in for the better part of 2 years. He's working his way back from that. And, oh, by the way, LSU has a lot of pitching depth this season, so they're not in a situation where they have to feel rushed to get him to any sort of final form, if you will, anytime real soon. So whether that's start of SEC play, the middle of SEC play, or if they just say, hey, as long as you're ready for May, we feel pretty good about that. There's just going to have to be some patience with Gage Jump. At least that's my expectation. But if through one time out, that's kind of what you're looking for there. So well done for him. All right, let's take a sip of water as we transition to talking about this weekend. So I will pull up the D1 baseball scoreboard, and I don't have to tell you folks how important this D1 baseball scoreboard is to keeping up with what is going on around college baseball on any given day. Action gets started around 3 p.m. Eastern time in the SEC. On these first wave of games, I'm interested in Kentucky and Washington State in Round Rock. Kendall Rogers will be there covering that tournament. So I'm sure you're following him. If you're watching this, I'm sure you're following Kendall Rogers, but make sure you're following along there, especially if you are a Kentucky fan. Got kind of a second wave that goes from 4 to 5:30, and then obviously some night games here, highlighted by this matchup between Iowa and Auburn, where I will be, and this matchup between Arkansas and Oregon State, where Aaron Fitt will be. So a lot of good stuff around the conference. Let's start by talking about the series of the weekend. And normally I would, as I did last week, I would try to highlight an actual series as opposed to a tournament. But frankly, the best stuff this weekend, our tournaments. So I'm going to go ahead and talk about Arkansas's weekend in Arlington. They're going to take on Oregon State, Oklahoma State, and Michigan. Tonight's matchup between Arkansas and Oregon State is the single best college baseball game we've had this season. Number 2 versus number 7. You've got a good pitching matchup on paper, Hagen Smith versus Aiden May. And for Arkansas, Hagen Smith, there's going to be a lot of eyes watching him, not just because that was always going to be the case because he's supremely talented, right? But given that last weekend didn't go well for him just getting through one inning, I think there is a little bit of intrigue in like, okay, was that something or was that nothing? And Oregon State presents a particularly tough challenge. That lineup is very, very talented. Travis Bazzana, Trent Caraway, the freshman, Micah McDowell, Gavin Turley, just a really, really talented lineup. So he's going to have to be better if Arkansas is going to win this game. So that's going to be a fun matchup. I should be finishing up with games in Jacksonville about midway through that game. So I'm kind of hoping to catch at least the latter half of it here this evening. Oklahoma State and Michigan looking a little bit ahead there. A couple of teams that are off to slower starts, if you will, but I think we understand the quality here. Oklahoma State lost a series to Sam Houston, but bounced back to blow out the Bearcats on Sunday of that series, and then won a midweek game against Abilene Christian, so kind of got back on the horse a little bit. We know how consistent that program is. I expect a bounce-back weekend. Now, because of the competition here, whether that means they win a couple games or not, I do think they will play better this weekend regardless. And then Michigan, same deal. Split 4 games with Western Michigan opening weekend, which is not exactly what they're looking for, but they lost the first 2, won the last 2, so perhaps moving a little bit in the right direction. We know it's a talented team, so that's not going to be easy either for Arkansas. Best Friday pitching matchup. I'm excited because I think it's where I am. You could make an argument for Hagen Smith and Aiden May in Arlington, but I'm fascinated by Iowa's Brody Brecht against Auburn's Chase Alsup. We're going to be bringing it, boys. The couple guys who have big time arm strength. Iowa's Brody Brecht maybe has the most arm strength in college baseball, most raw arm strength, arm talent. Fastball up to 101 miles an hour. But he's kind of an interesting guy. He's not as fastball dominant as you would think, given his velocity. He actually, in his start last weekend, threw more sliders than he did fastballs. And part of that is because he frankly has better command of the slider than he does the fastball. The fastball, he can end up kind of spraying it a little bit or, going, middle with it sometimes. And so you end up with a lot of outings where he throws 4 1/3 and he only gave up 1 hit, but he walked 5. And so he's thrown 95 pitches into the 5th inning, and maybe he's given up a run, maybe he hasn't, but he's not going to get deep in the game. That's the challenge for him is, can you be efficient enough to complete 5 innings? I don't think anyone's expecting Brody Brecht to be a guy who's going to give you 7 or 8 every time out, because I don't think he's ever going to be that efficient, at least not at the college level. You're just kind of looking for, hey, can you get through 5 and dominate through 5? And he certainly has the stuff to do that, and we will see. And Chase also a pretty similar kind of guy historically. Big arm, struggles with control and command. Walks can be an issue. So is he able to curtail that enough to give Auburn some depth in the game? Last weekend against Eastern Kentucky, he actually gave up some hits, which typically is kind of the opposite. Typically, he's hard to hit, but he'll give up some free passes. Didn't walk anybody last weekend against EKU. Did give up some hits, though, but I think Auburn would take that trade-off, because as long as he's in the strike zone, he's not going to get hit every week. His stuff is too good to get hit around every week. So I think you'd rather him be in the strike zone and maybe run the risk of giving up some hits than the alternative where it's just free passes. So we'll see how that goes. Bullpen's going to be important in this game. Again, neither of the two pitchers are the most efficient pitchers out there, so they're going to have to throw bullpen arms to finish this game off. So we'll have to see how that ends up factoring in the later innings. All right, let's wrap real quick by a little bit of what to watch for here. I will be in Jacksonville, so if you're an Auburn fan, make sure you're following along. Should be a good tournament in general. Virginia, the highest ranked team in the field. You've got Iowa, number 18 ranked. Auburn is probably team 26 or 27 in our rankings. And then Wichita State, which had a lot of roster turnover, didn't know what to expect, but they won a series against the OVC favorite Little Rock last weekend. So playing well. We'll have to see how good this team actually is. This weekend will be a good test, but certainly playing well. So that adds a little bit of intrigue to what the Shockers will bring to the table this weekend. Aaron Fitt will be at Globe Life Field. So again, Arkansas fans, he's your guy for keeping up with what's going on with the Razorbacks this weekend. Kendall is at Round Rock. So if you're a Kentucky fan, make sure you're following along with him as he will be covering that tournament. And speaking of the Round Rock tournament and the Jacksonville tournament, make sure you're subscribed to our D1 Baseball streaming packages to make sure you are getting a chance to follow along live with those games. The broadcast teams that we have as a part of this are outstanding. I know Darren Vaught, who also hosts an ACC baseball podcast for us here at D1 Baseball, is doing the games in Jacksonville. So, high quality broadcasts. We're excited to bring it to you guys. So make sure you have your subscriptions prior to first pitches here in Jacksonville. We're looking at 4 hours to first pitch as this is being recorded, just about 4 hours. So excited about everything happening around the SEC Friday. Thank you for following along here at Weekend Waypoints. Make sure you're subscribed to D1 Baseball. Get an annual subscription, a monthly subscription, whatever works for you. Make sure you're subscribed to the D1 Baseball podcast and Highway to Hoover on whatever podcasting app of choice you use. And then make sure you have those streaming packages ahead of this weekend's games in Round Rock and Jacksonville. That is it for the Friday Weekend Waypoints episode. Enjoy the baseball, everyone.